Let's get into it. Scorpio rising for the zodiacal year ahead, Aries to Pisces season 2022 to 2023. If we haven't met yet, my name is Shuka. I am a traditional astrologer that uses both Hellenistic and ancient Persian techniques in order to decipher the language of the stars and map out what's coming up for you. Feel free to like and subscribe for future videos that help you maximize your potential using the stars, like they say, as above, so below. In order to jump into the spring season, which includes Aries, Taurus, and Gemini season, we gotta rewind a little bit and go back to December 29th of 2021 when Jupiter moved into your Pisces 5th house. And this house deals with things like creativity, love, romance, sex, fun, anything that you birth into the world. And it created this beginning of an expansion period in this area of life. With Jupiter being at home here in Pisces, it is an abundance that you're looking at here in this particular area. And back on February 3rd of 2022, all planets were stationed direct. They will remain that way until April 29th of 2022. Think forward propelling motion, a go, go, go sort of vibe. And on March 20th, 2022, the sun makes its way into Aries, marking the beginning of the spring and a new zodiacal year. On April 4th, 2022, Mars conjuncts Saturn in your Aquarius 4th house. This house deals with home, property, roots, and foundation. Depending on whether you're a day or night chart will impact how you feel this, but think of Mars as the planet of taking action or charging forward, and Saturn is the planet of restriction and boundaries and structure, and particularly in Aquarius, it loves the word no. So think of a full stop on an action that you want to take on this area of life. Don't worry, this too shall pass. On April 12th, 2022, Jupiter conjuncts Neptune in your Pisces 5th house of love, sex, romance, creativity, and the things that you birth into the world. It's a good idea to wait to make any irreversible decisions until this transit passes, because with Jupiter meeting Neptune here, there's a potential to put someone or something up on a pedestal, or for things to be too good to be true and being a little confused and delusional about the actual circumstances in front of you. Wait till this passes before you do anything you can't take back. On April 29th, 2022, Pluto stations retrograde in your Capricorn 3rd house. This house deals with things like communication, short trips, news, siblings, your community, and with Pluto being the planet of rebirth or transformation, think of it as a rethinking of deep-rooted beliefs that you may have in this area of life, leading to a transformation on the other end. On April 30th, 2022, there is a partial solar eclipse in your Taurus 7th house. Eclipses tend to be cataclysmic events that set off a chain reaction leading to a either new beginning or an ending in an area of life. And with this being a partial solar eclipse, we think of this as a new beginning that'll play out over the course of the next 6 months. They tend to be events outside of your control. Go along for the ride. There's about to be a new beginning in your one-on-one relationships, whether they be romantic, business partnerships, or contracts. Just go with its flow. On May 10th, 2022, Jupiter enters your Aries 6th house. Now this house deals with things like subordinates, coworkers, pets, and your physical health. So it leaves this period of expansion in your creativity, love, and romance, and it moves into this expansion in your physical health, your subordinates, coworkers, and pets. On May 15th, 2022, there is a total lunar eclipse in your Scorpio 1st house. This house deals with things like yourself, your image, your body, your ego, and with it being a total lunar eclipse, think of it as a cataclysmic event that sets off a chain reaction that'll play out to an ending in this area of life for you. Think of this as an ending into how you show up into the world. On June 4th, 2022, Saturn stations retrograde in your Aquarius 4th house dealing with home, property, roots, and foundation. And with Saturn being the planet of restrictions and boundaries, think of it as a rethinking or reanalyzing of the boundaries or structure that you have in place in this area of life. Taking us into the summer season, which is much slower. It is retrograde. It's about slowing down, reanalyzing, rethinking. Not a good time to start anything new. On June 28th, 2022, Neptune stations retrograde in your Pisces 5th house of love, romance, sex, and creativity. Think of this as a rethinking or reanalyzing of your ideals or dreams surrounding this area of life. On July 28th, 2022, Jupiter stations retrograde in your Aries 6th house, dealing with subordinates, coworkers, pets, and physical health. So think a rethinking of the expansion and the growth that's been taking place here. And on August 24th, 2022, Uranus stations retrograde in your Taurus 7th house of intimate relationships, whether they be romantic or business partnerships or contracts. So think of this as a rethinking of innovative solutions or disruptions that may be occurring in this area of life. Taking us into the fall season, your season. This includes Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius season. On October 8th, 2022, Pluto stations direct in your Capricorn third house of news, communication, short-term trips, siblings. So think of this as you've rethought these deep-seated beliefs that you may have in this area of life that have come up to the surface, and you're ready to proceed with the transformation in this area of life. On October 22nd, 2022, Saturn stations direct in your Aquarius fourth house of home, property, roots, and foundation. So you've rethought your boundaries and you've rethought your restrictions in this area of life, and you're ready to implement this into the structure here moving forward. On October 25th, 2022, there is a partial solar eclipse in your Scorpio first house. Now think of this as a catalytic event setting off a chain reaction for a new beginning taking place here in the area of life surrounding yourself, your body, your image, and your ego. On October 27th, 2022, Jupiter retrograde moves back into your Pisces fifth house of love, sex, romance, creativity, and what you birth into the world. Now, if you remember back in May of 2021 to July of 2021, Jupiter shortly dipped into Pisces before going back into Aquarius, giving us sort of a preview of the expansion that would be taking place in this area of life. December 29th, 2021, it entered here and it stayed until May 10th of 2022. Think of that as the peak period or the climax of the growth and abundance that took place here in this area of life. And this is sort of like the wrapping up of this area of life. It's retrograding here, having you rethinking the growth and abundance that's taken place here. It will station direct on November 23rd, 2022, having rethought the growth that has come to pass in this area of life and really being settled into it because Jupiter won't be back here for another 12 or so years. On October 30th, 2022, Mars stations retrograde in your Gemini 8th house. This house deals with things like shared resources, investments, and taxes. So think a rethinking of how you take action or what investments or shared resources you have at play. On November 8th, 2022, there is a total lunar eclipse in your Taurus 7th house, dealing with intimate relationships, romantic business partnerships, contracts. So think of this as a cataclysmic event leading to an ending playing out over the course of the next 6 months here. Again, events outside of your control, go with the flow as best you can. On December 3rd, 2022, Neptune stations direct in your Pisces fifth house. This is the house that deals with love, sex, romance, and creativity. So think you've rethought the ideals and dreams that you have in this area of life and you're ready to implement them moving forward. And on December 20th, 2022, Jupiter re-enters your Aries sixth house, really entering into that peak period of a growth and expansion in this area, dealing with coworkers, subordinates, pets, and your physical health. Taking us into the final season of the zodiac, winter season, which incorporates Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces season. On January 12th, 2023, Mars stations direct in your Gemini 8th house. This house deals with shared resources, investments, and taxes, and you're ready to implement new action in this area of life. On January 22nd, 2023, Uranus stations direct in your Taurus 7th house, dealing with one-on-one relationships, whether they be romantic, business relationships, or contracts. So think you've rethought the innovative solutions or disruptions that have occurred here and you're ready to proceed forward. And again, from January 22nd, 2023 to April 21st, 2023, we have another period where all the planets are stationed direct. So think forward propelling motion, a go, go, go sort of vibe. On March 7th, 2023, Saturn will finally leave your Aquarius fourth house, dealing with home, property, roots, and foundation, and make its way into your Pisces fifth house, dealing with love, sex, romance, creativity, and what you birth into the world. So think the restrictions or boundaries or structures that were taking place in that area of the fourth house, now moving into these fifth house areas. On March 15th, 2023, there is a little bit of an interesting day. Depending on if you're a day or night chart, could play out differently for you. A little bit more challenging for day charts, a little bit less challenging for night charts. And to quote Marin, it is a passive-aggressive mess. Mars in your Gemini 8th house of shared resources and investments will square Neptune in your Pisces fifth house of what you birth into the world, creativity, love, sex, and romance. So think tension between these two areas of life. And then as if that's not interesting enough, on March 16th, 2023, Mercury joins this party. So Mercury, the Sun, and Neptune all conjunct in your Pisces fifth house of love, sex, creativity, what you birth into the world, and romance will all be square or in tension with your shared resources, your investments, and your taxes in that 8th house ruled by Gemini. And as if that's not a big enough party, Venus in your Aries 6th house of physical health, subordinates, coworkers, and pets will square Pluto in your Capricorn 3rd house of news, communication, siblings, short-term trips, things of that nature. There's tension all around. The good news is tension usually leads to growth, so I look forward to seeing you all on the other side. And on March 20th, 2023, the sun makes its way back into Aries, marking the beginning of a new zodiacal year. Getting into the retrogrades, we'll start with Mercury. As always, expect delays. No transportation's gonna be wonky. Technology's gonna be wonky. And for the love of God, please do not touch your hair. Mercury retrograde, the first one of this year coming up. On May 10th, 2022, Mercury stations retrograde in your Gemini 8th house of shared resources, investments, and taxes. It will retrograde back into your Taurus 7th house of intimate relationships, whether they be romantic, business, or contracts, before it stations direct there on June 3rd of 2022. On September 9th of 2022, Mercury stations retrograde in your Libra 12th house, which deals with mental health and isolation. So think a rethinking or reanalyzing of this area of life. It will retrograde back into your Virgo 11th house, which deals with social networks, groups, your future goals, organizations. So rethinking in that area of life before it stations direct here on October 2nd of 2022. And the last Mercury retrograde of the zodiacal year ahead on December 29th, 2022, Mercury will station retrograde in your Capricorn 3rd house of news, communication, siblings, and short-term trips until it stations direct here on January 18th of 2023. Don't be surprised if there's delays on short trips, things don't go exactly as planned. Try and remain flexible. And again, don't sign any contracts, don't change your hair. It's about rethinking, reanalyzing, and revisiting. Not a great time to start something new. Getting into the other planetary retrogrades, Mars stations retrograde on October 30th, 2022 in your Gemini 8th house of shared resources, investments, and taxes. So think a rethinking of how you take action here in this area of life. It will station direct here January 12th, 2023, propelling things forward once again. On July 28th, 2022, Jupiter stations retrograde in your Aries 6th house, having a rethinking of the growth and expansion taking place in this area of life, dealing with subordinates, coworkers, pets, and your physical health. It will retrograde back in your Pisces 5th house, so rethinking of the expansion and growth that's occurred with love, romance, sex, creativity, and what you birth into the world. It will station direct here in your 5th Pisces house on November 23rd, 2022. On June 4th, 2022, Saturn stations retrograde in your Aquarius 4th house, which deals with home, property, roots, and foundation. It will remain retrograde here, having you rethinking the structure, boundaries, or restrictions that are placed here in this area of life until it stations direct again on October 22nd, 2022. Moving into the outer planet retrograde. On August 24th, 2022, Uranus stations retrograde in your Taurus 7th house, dealing with one-on-one relationships, whether they be romantic, business partnerships, or contracts. So think a rethinking of innovative solutions or disruptions that may be occurring in this area of life until it stations direct January 22nd, 2023. On June 28th, 2022, Neptune stations retrograde in your Pisces 5th house of love, romance, creativity, sex, and what you birth into the world. So think a rethinking of the dreams and ideals you have surrounding this area of life until it stations direct here December 4th, 2022. And lastly, Pluto stations retrograde April 29th, 2022 in your Capricorn 3rd house, dealing with communication, short-term trips, news, siblings, sometimes social media. It will station direct here on October 8th, 2022. Think of this as a rethinking of deep-rooted beliefs in this area of life that lead to some sort of rebirth or transformation. And lastly, a recap of the eclipses. Remember, cataclysmic events that set off a chain of events out of your control, leading to change occurring over the course of the following 6 months. So on April 30th, 2022, a partial solar eclipse in your Taurus 7th house of one-on-one relationships, romantic, business, or contracts. So think a new beginning taking place over the course of the next 6 months in this area of life. On May 15th, 2022, there is a total lunar eclipse in your Scorpio 1st house, dealing with yourself, your image, your body, and your ego. So think an ending taking place over the course of the next 6 months in this area of life. On October 25th, 2022, there is a partial solar eclipse in your Scorpio first house, dealing with self-image, body, and ego. Think a new beginning taking place over the course of the next 6 months. And lastly, on November 8th, 2022, there is a total lunar eclipse in your Taurus 7th house, dealing with one-on-one relationships, romantic business partnerships, or contracts. So think an ending taking place over the course of the next 6 months in this area of life. So that's it for your zodiacal year ahead, Aries to Pisces season 2022 to 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Particularly comment. I love to read how these zodiacal transits play out for everybody. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.